Hello everyone, this is Jonathan Little for PokerNews.com, and today we are playing pretty deep stacked in the big blind with Queen 6 of clubs. Not a particularly good hand, but they don't always give you good hands. So here, it folds around to the player on the button who raises to 125 out of his 9,000 effective stack. This is very early in a $3,000 buy-in World Series of Poker event. And with Queen 6 of clubs, I think you can really go a lot of ways. If you think your opponent's going to play great, I don't despise folding. You definitely can play quite a bit tighter when there are no antes in play and you're playing deep stacked, as opposed to shallow stacked play with antes in play. So I don't despise folding. If this hand was offsuit, I would definitely fold it. But with suited hands, I typically call and see a flop if it's a 2.5 big blind raise or less. Also, the player on the button is a kid, and kids typically raise with at least a reasonably wide range. So I'm usually going to call in this spot. If you told me you 3-bet here, I would not be so opposed. I think it'd be perfectly fine to make it 400 or 450 or something like that. But I typically call, and then we're going to be checking a lot of flops, and we'll go from there. So the flop comes pretty great for me. 10, 9, 3, 2 clubs. The opponent, or I check to the opponent, he bets 200, and now I raise to 575. And I like this. I could even see a bigger raise being fine. Notice a pot size raise here would be 3 times the last bet, which is 200, so that's up to 600, plus any additional money in the pot. So 600 plus 275 is 875. So as you see, this is quite a small raise, at least in proportion to the pot. So I could definitely go bigger, and as you are playing deeper stacked, you definitely want to at least consider making bigger raises. If you do make smaller raises, it's very important to understand that you are inducing your opponent to call. So if you're inducing your opponent to call, what should that mean? What should that mean for your future play? Well, it should mean that you should continue bluffing on later streets. And I think a lot of people don't quite realize that if they check raise the flop and get called, that doesn't necessarily mean their opponent has to have a really strong hand. I think they get a little bit confused thinking I check raise and I only defend against check raises with good hands, therefore our opponent must have a good hand. But that's certainly not true. A lot of players will call small check raises with quite a wide range. I mean, a lot of people will call here with king queen and king jack and maybe even ace king with the ace of clubs, or maybe pocket eights with the eight of clubs. And a lot of those hands will fold to additional pressure. So just be aware of that moving forward. I do bet 575 and he calls. And when I do make it 575, I already know I'm firing off here. The 10's an interesting turn. You definitely want to ask yourself in this scenario, would I have any 10s in my range? And if you have no 10s in your range because you know that you never check raise with a 10, well, this is actually quite bad for you. If you know that you have a lot of 10s in your range because you do check raise ace 10 and king 10 in spots like this, then this 10 isn't so bad for you. It's actually quite good. You also want to ask yourself, does my opponent know my strategy or have any preconceived notions about my strategy? I mean, I make lots of strategy videos, so perhaps if I'm playing against someone who knows me, they have some ideas that I'm perhaps not check raising a ton of 10s in this spot. And if that's the case, then clearly I need to be a little bit more cautious here. But even then, you very often want to be betting with your best made hands and your draws, especially if the draw has little to no showdown value. And clearly that's the case in this scenario. So I'm going to keep betting. Notice I could also have 10-9 or pocket 9s or pocket 3s. So there's certainly some nut hands in my range. It's not like I never ever have the nuts here. And I like this bet size. If I bet this size on the turn, I do think some players will still stick around kind of wide. I mean, my opponent's going to call with any decent flush draw. He's also going to call with queen jack. He's also going to call with a 9 some portion of the time, or a hand like pocket jacks. And I'm not going to say all those hands will fold every time to an additional bet, but quite often they will. So when I bet 1100, I do think we're going to get some folds immediately, mainly from ace highs and king high type hands. And then on the river, I'm going to bet again to ensure the ace highs are gone, and then also to try to get them off every hand worse than at least pocket jacks. So I like this play. My river bet's going to be quite big, and I would make the same play against most people with the full houses and 10s as well. And that's just going to put the opponent in a tough spot because he doesn't know if I have a draw or if I don't. One thing you need to be cautious of is bluffing too often in this spot, because if you check raise the flop with every potential draw, that's going to be king, queen, king, jack, queen, jack, jack 8, 8, 7, maybe even the worse hands like 8-6 and 7-6, although that'd be a little bit optimistic. And then all the flush draws, right? Maybe even some backdoor flush draws like ace 5 of diamonds, and then we get a diamond on the turn and we keep betting. And as you see, that's a lot of draws I've just named off. And given that there are so many draws possible, you should either not bluff with all of them on the flop, or you should check raise some of them on the flop and then not continue bluffing them on the turn. In general, the best draws to keep bluffing are going to be the ones that lack showdown value. And that's what we have here. So I did bet 1100 on the turn and he just folded. So it worked out very nicely. Sometimes it's nice and easy. So that's going to be it for this hand for PokerNews.com. Thank you all very much for being here. If you have any questions, definitely let me know on Twitter at Jonathan Little. I also post a weekly educational blog over at JonathanLittlePoker.com, so check that out if you have some time. And I'll talk to you next week. Thanks for watching.